Welcome to Why We Podcast with your host, Vik Rajan, where attorneys, accountants, coaches, and clients share how their show helps their clients, their audience, their guests, and their own practices. You can watch episodes on YouTube and listen through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. For the live stream and prior episodes, go to videosocials.net/whywepodcast. Have you ever thought about hosting your own podcast? Already host one? Do you like to be featured on other people's podcasts? Come to our next show host networking event and introduce yourself to dozens of podcast hosts who interview subject matter experts like you. You can RSVP for free at videosocials.net/showhosts. Now here's the host of Why We Podcast, Vik Rajan.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Why We Podcast. I'm really excited today. We have two wonderful folks that host their own live streams and shows. Dr. Meleth, a pleasure to meet you. And Mary Scott and I have known each other for many, many, many years out in the Long Island business community. We've since moved from Long Island. I now live in New York City, and Mary, you're in the St. Louis area?
That's right.
Yeah. Why don't we start with you, Mary, and then we'll move over to Dr. Sree. Mary, can you tell us a little bit more, but even before we get into your individual shows, I'd love to hear a little bit of background of what you do professionally, and then we can segue on how and why your live stream started.
Okay. I used to be a videographer. I was on the streets of New York and Long Island shooting videos, business to business, did a couple of documentary films that made money. Hey, me and Ken Burns.
Even better.
And COVID hit, and I decided it's time to get paid for what I know rather than what I do. So I started doing consulting.
And then, Dr. Sree, what about you?
I have two lives. I have a 9-to-5 job. I'm a professional. I'm a biostatistician. So I have a PhD in applied statistics, and I do a lot of health research, work with pharma clients to design clinical trials and stuff. But I have always had a deep interest in mind-body techniques and how they impact our health. And so I have trained as a coach. I'm a transformational life coach. I work with clients on their money issues, on essentially the podcast. I know we've not yet got into that. It's about people getting to really accept themselves for who they are and understanding what their power is and standing in that power and showing that in the world. So that is what my coaching aims to do, to tell people, show them what they're worth and help them to see their value.
Well, you made the segue, so we may as well do that, Sree. So how did that even start in terms of having a podcast and that other kind of focus of yours, which to some degree could affect the pharmacology, right? I think there is some connection. I am no expert by any means, so that's completely conjecture. But how did that transition happen, and how did that pivot focus, and then why the show? How did the show even come about?
So like I said, a lot of my work was in cancer. There has been a lot of work in cancer that looked at what's called psycho-neuro-oncology kind of things, where people are looking at both the effect of mind-body associations with dealing with cancer. There is no claim that anything cures cancer, but there was, when I got I got my PhD late, like when I was about 40 in 2000, and which is revealing my age, I guess. but I've been very spiritual all my life, and I've got reading this literature, and so I got more and more interested in it. And I had my own practices of meditation, and got introduced to EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and tapping on acupressure points. And as I progressed in my career, I began to want more and more to, I went from being a person who was very unsure of herself to a person who is very confident and knows her own power. And I knew that I had a lot to teach other women in that but I also knew that I needed some guidance in how to become a coach and how to do all of that. So I got the training, I got certified in coaching, and my podcast is called This Is Your Time to Shine. And what I want is for particularly aimed at women sort of who have always felt that there is something that they were meant to do more than what they're doing, particularly if you're in, corporate America or corporate anywhere. And then but have always hesitated. So the theme of the podcast is to interview other women like me who have heard that voice and who have stepped out and taken the risk to do something beyond what they're doing. So I've had a person who was a very high level accountant move and get her psychotherapy training and become a psychotherapist and become very successful in that, because there was always this little voice inside that said, what you're doing is not quite what you're meant to do in the world. And so the idea is to expose people to that and help other people come up with that.
And we're going to go deeper into that. I want to hear the story of how you decided on the name and the other types of guests and what and the kind of results you've seen. But before we even get there, I would like to hear from Mary. So what about you? So you moved to St. Louis. We were kind of talking offline, right before the show, and kind of catching up on each other. And give me the trajectory of how you kind of recreated what you were doing out on Long Island that I know well, out in the St. Louis area. And then how and when and why did the podcast, or in your case, it's a live stream. How did that start?
It started because I got involved in the startup business ecosystem here in St. Louis. St. Louis is a fabulous place to start a business. And having been a startup at one point, I remember what an arduous journey it was to try to find the resources that were available and which ones were going to be right for me. And I thought, okay, I'm being exposed to this fabulous ecosystem. How about if I help the next startup not have to do that? So I put together the Startup Resources Guide for St. Louis, which included all the resources on one website that startups can use to see which ones do what for whom. And it gives all the resources a chance to know who each other is, so that when someone walks through your door and they're not ready for you yet, you can not just say bye. You can say, oh, go talk to this person.
So does this tend to be more tech oriented, as we tend to kind of assume, startup very often implies tech, but not necessarily, right? So
not necessarily. There are a bunch of different kinds of startups. There's the ones that essentially start a business, and it's a gig. It's the business that they do themselves, that they get paid for, so they're their own employee, and that's all they really need. Then there's the startups that you tend to think of in terms of tech and other things, where they're expecting to scale. They've got an idea, they're going to change the world, and they eventually want to have employees and lots of money and worldwide fame and fortune, and then they want to get bought by somebody huge. So we've got a lot of folks in both camps here, and it's great fun being able to help all of them get on their road to success. My mission, as my business mission, is to help startups become wildly successful.
So tell us, when did your live stream start? What was the impetus? I mean, you're kind of a new entrant, new kid on the block, so to speak, right? So you don't,
exactly.
I would assume you didn't know a lot of people before you got there. And was it a way for you to kind of insert yourself into the ecosystem and be a player from day one? And when did it start, and was that the impetus?
I started doing my consulting about not quite 2 years ago, and then I thought, wait a minute, you've got all these video skills and you're a brand new brand, and to be able to get out there. So I thought, okay, let me just start with a Facebook Live and just get in the habit of interviewing somebody with advice for startups once a week. Apparently there wasn't anything out there.
That's amazing.
And so at this point, I've got almost 46 interviews.
That's awesome.
When I hit 50, I'm going to start going twice a week.
All right,
but
cool.
It's called Stuck. Time to improv.
All right, great.
Nice.
And is that the name of the show?
That's the name of the show. It's advice for startup businesses.
And so we're going to get to Dr. Sree's story or backstory of the name of her show. Why don't you tell us the name of your show, Mary? Well, not the name, but the backstory. So Stuck, Time to Improv.
Time to
I would
Improv.
think it would be more almost like an acting show.
You
Where did that
might.
come from?
That came from the way I do consulting.
Okay.
When somebody comes up to me with a problem,
Sure.
I riff on it. I use the concepts and the methods of improvisation. So it's the whole concept of yes and.
Sure.
You always validate whatever the problem is, and you add to it, and you add to that, and you add to that. So we're doing a lot of improv in the area of solving business problems. So it sounded like, okay, that's kind of how I do it. So why don't I just call the show that?
You're right.
And it'll be interesting. It'll be a name that kind of stands out.
We're going to come back to you in a moment, and I want to hear about the format of the show. Is there segments to the show? Is there a template that you tend to follow interview after interview? And that kind of gives us insight because everyone has their own style. Sri, what about you? Tell me the name of your show again, and this is your time to shine, I believe. And how and why did you hone in on that phrase being the show name?
Because as a woman and as so the first thought was who do I want to talk to, right? Who am I aiming this to?
Who's the audience?
And it was as is usual, it was someone like me who is in a position where we are a kind of empty nesters. A lot of women who have spent their life caring for other people, supporting the family, even though they might have had a 9-to-5 job, have never fully allowed themselves to have a dream beyond that.
Okay.
And the image that came to me was that helped me really to come up with this was someone kind of sitting in Starbucks, and a bright bushy-tailed little girl walks in, and she's full of herself, and she's talking about all her dreams and what happened today, and there's this older person kind of like me looking at her and thinking, where did that go? Where did that sparkle that I had go? And feeling regret, feeling jealousy, maybe all of that together, and then realizing that the reason I'm feeling all this is because I'm not fulfilled. And now that you have the time, even though you have, I love the fact that Mary's show is called Stuck, because essentially that's what this is saying. You are stuck here in this place, but this is your time to shine. So let us talk about other women who have done what you're doing, and let us help you see that it is possible to do this. And there are all kinds of fears that come up. So that's the story.
So that's the affirmation and the edification you would want to give to your guests, or that they've maybe said to themselves, as you've said to yourself, this is your time to shine, well-seasoned, accomplished, raised a family, raised a career, and now it's time to really be all that you want to be, without the confines. That's interesting, and it's funny that you brought that up. That thread is something we were chatting offline, even, right? That we tend to find that guests, even if they're in completely different fields or different types of shows, there's, in a spooky way, some type of connection here, and people are coming to you, Mary, because they're stuck in their business and business growth. And in you, Dr. Sri, for the show, it's personally, let's say, in personal fulfillment, but stuck and moving forward in one way or another. That's a nice tie-in.
Yeah, and often what they want to do is start a business, right?
Sure. Okay.
Often, so as a coach, as a psychotherapist, as a massage therapist who's moving into other areas, so it's actually really very, very closely tied.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Yeah.
So it's easy to understand where Mary finds her guests, right? I mean, these are the St. Louis startup ecosystem, as you put it, right, Mary? Sri, where do you find your guests? Where they're willing to be, I guess, vulnerable even, right? Because they're showing, maybe they've kind of gone through a hard time in their, finding themselves, right? Knowing thyself. And now do they have that do they know their next chapter, and that's why they're proud to talk about their story? Because very often it's awkward and embarrassing if you're in the throes of it, to kind of feel that, to admit that that you're lost is awkward, unless you're now been found.
And I think one of the skills I think I have is to hold that space, right? To allow them to be that vulnerable. And where I get them from is I have a network of people that I worked with, that we've coached together, and they have their network. So it's a lot of times people who are willing, who have done the work, and who are willing to help others with their own experience. So there is a network of, and I'm part of the women's business development networks here, and so it's through all of those connections that.
Have you heard any stories, people coming out of the woodwork, either because they were guests or even listeners and viewers, people coming in and sharing how it's impacted them? Has that happened yet?
I've had occasions where, like my one of the first comments I had after my first podcast was my daughter's friend, actually one of her best friends, who said he listened to it and he immediately connected more with his mom, and how this was true in her case, and it helped him understand what she might have gone through. So it opened his heart a little bit more to her. The other one was somebody in one of my guests getting feedback about the podcast, that one of her clients, I think in Australia, she's in Ireland, and one of her clients in Australia said, "Wow, I really, really liked what you said there, and I didn't know all of this about you, and it was really uplifting to hear this." So it's amazing how the word spreads and what it does.
Yeah, when we were chatting before we went live, Mary and I, right, we were chatting about how we can be so global nowadays, being virtual, right? It's one of, at least a silver lining to this time period that we're living through, that the global aspect has become much more natural. Mary, what about you? Have you heard stories from your guests and from even the viewers on Facebook Live, people coming out of the woodwork of the St. Louis startup community?
Well, it's not just the St. Louis community, because we are global. Probably more than 50% of the people I interview are national folks.
All right, great.
I found folks in California and Canada and Maryland and all over the place.
Sure.
Some of these folks are nationally known speakers, and they're happy enough to come on my little podcast. So that's been really very cool. And I especially like when I can connect some of my speakers with each other.
Yeah.
Because they might not be on the same page, but they're in the same book. So that's where it makes a big difference for me particularly. And the advice we get for startups is great. I've had lots of people comment, particularly when I talk to investors about what they actually want to see in a startup presentation. The startups are going, yeah, thanks. I really needed to know that.
That's awesome. That's a great impact, right? To see that your guests are giving the insights that really make a difference.
Right.
That's really cool. So we wanted to know about, how do you format your show? Like, how long is it? Do you treat every show kind of as a template of questions? Like, what's the format like for you?
My show is short. I usually, and because I'm a video editor, I will stream live on Facebook for whatever amount of time, usually about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
And then I will edit it down to 10 minutes or less, because you can't post on LinkedIn if it's longer than 10 minutes.
Sure.
I always ask people a little bit about their expertise and what advice they have for startups.
Yeah.
And what do they see? What do they think startups really should not be doing? So that's kind of where it goes. I always ask if they have parting thoughts.
Right. So
try
it's
to
nice
really
to
give
kind of.
them a chance to tell what they need to tell, and always put in links to whoever the speaker is, so that the listener can follow up if there's more questions, which we hope there will be more questions, because we just want to give people a sample here.
That's great. Yeah, I like to know that kind of what's the pattern like, because it helps from a preparation standpoint. I'm going to have Dr. Sri answer that same question. And when I come back to you, Mary, it would be good to kind of hear one thing. We talked about what are the benefits to your audience and the benefits to your guests and those kind of anecdotes. I'd love to hear what kind of impact it's made on your consultancy, especially in the St. Louis area, but you could possibly work nationally. I'd like to hear about that. But Sri, for you, is there a template? Is there a format that you tend to kind of see and follow? How do you segment your
Yes. So what I've done is I have a list of areas that I like. That I have a sheet that talks about what the podcast is about, who the
Right.
audience is, and then the kind of areas that I think make sense for the podcast. So, what will happen to my family if I start something?
Sure.
Who's going to take care of? Who's attending the PTAs? Who is attending? Who's going to pack lunches? Those kinds of fears. What if I lose my friends? Or, what if I become successful and somebody gets jealous? Or, those kind of subconscious fears that we often don't even fully articulate or even acknowledge. So I have a list of those questions, and then I typically would meet with the client, the potential guest before, and we have about a 30-minute conversation.
You do a pre-interview vetting.
Yeah, what exactly they want to do, and then I have fairly standard questions based on the area that they want to explore. So some
and you give them these questions in advance, like it's part of your pre
questions in advance. Yeah,
that's cool.
And then also the last question is always about, tell the audience where they can get in touch with you. Do you have a freebie for them?
Yeah. I'll definitely ask you, both of you, those questions in a couple of minutes, but we wrap up. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask Mary that the question about the impact on her business, and likewise, I want to hear, is there an impact on your practice, and kind of hear about that, and then we'll take a commercial break, and then we'll do some of those wrap-up questions that both of you were alluding to. Mary, so what's the impact that you've seen?
Again,
46 episodes in.
It was great for brand recognition, and because I didn't used to work at a university and I didn't have a book, having the podcast and then having the YouTube channel with all of these interviews has really impacted the perception of my expertise. So it's made even the local people go, oh yeah, she's not just the lady with purple hair we see at Venture Cafe every Thursday.
So you've created a stage for yourself. You've become a celebrity CEO in your world. So it's definitely become a way. Has anyone come to start working with you because of your podcast? Has that happened yet? It will, if not yet. Yeah. How did that happen? Do you know? Can you share with us what was that trajectory like? I mean, it could be a funnel in a very sophisticated way, or it could just be a relationship.
It's somebody who kind of saw me as the lady who is networking at Venture Cafe every Thursday, and then got a link to my YouTube channel and saw some of the stuff I did with investors, and they decided to actually hire me.
That's excellent. All right, good. Yeah, what do you know? This podcast stuff works.
It does. It really
That's good.
does.
Sri, what about you? What's the impact?
And I have to be a little bit, I have to be honest. My life got turned upside down last year a little bit, because of COVID, being laid off, then getting a job, then my husband having a stroke, and then getting fired from the job, and then getting a new job. And so it's been a whirlwind. So it's been a minute since I've had time to interview people. But I've also recently started doing lives on Instagram. Every Tuesday at noon, I do an Instagram live where I actually do tapping sessions on whatever whatever occurs to me, or often what clients ask me to do. So it's called Freedom with Sri, and so part of this whole thing is, for me, is getting back into the business of being
Good.
seen and being heard and being known.
Okay, good.
Because I do believe that people like us who venture into this, to take these risks, do
Sure.
have a message and need to pursue it regardless of blocks that I've had plenty of in the last year or so.
Sounds like it, but it's perseverance.
You have to just do it scared. You're never going to get it perfect. And just jump it in with both feet, because you don't have that many followers to disappoint in the beginning anyway. Just go for it and make sure it's consistent every week, same day, same time.
Yeah.
It's so important to do it that way, and just do it scared. Everybody's scared. You're not unique. Just do it.
Thank you.
Good point. So yeah, I want to hear a little bit more in terms of, both of you have kind of alluded to your YouTube channel and the podcast. I'd love for people to learn a little bit more of how they can watch and listen to your shows. Let's take a quick commercial break first, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of wrap up so people can get a hold of you and kind of learn more about your show and how they can benefit from it directly.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want your own podcast like this one? My team will do all the grunt work for you. Just show up, smile, and enjoy talking to your potential clients and referral relationships. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Are you a busy lawyer, coach, consultant like me? You should have a podcast done for you to get you more clients, impress your colleagues, and it becomes your perpetual referrals flywheel. We find you the right guests. We schedule your guests, handle all the podcast tech, get you into Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and more, done for you. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Now back to the show.
And we're back. Mary, do you know about our show host networking events that happen once a month?
No, and I would love to put them into my virtual networking calendar.
Oh, there you go. So, and Dr. Sri, you weren't there yesterday, were you?
No.
Do you know about them? So for benefit of the viewers, listeners, and for both of you. So once a month, usually it's the last Thursday. I mean, it has been for the past 5 months. Last Thursday of the month, the next one being June 30th, the last one being yesterday, from 1 p.m. Eastern, and we always end within 2 hours. And it's for folks like us who host a show, an interview show usually. And it's an opportunity, if you are interested in getting booked on other people's podcasts. That's the whole point of it. It's a networking event for podcast hosts, live streamers, video show hosts. And really, this kind of conversation happens in the breakout rooms of how did we start our show? Why did we start our show? How did we come up with the name? Resources, tips, ideas, but then along the way, of course, sharing our own expertise that would be helpful for somebody else's audience and vice versa. It's not really a swap meet per se, right? Because Mary may be great for Dr. Sri's show, but maybe Dr. Sri isn't a perfect fit for Mary's show, or vice versa. So that it happens all the time where people are getting booked left and right on other people's shows. So if you're available, Video Socials, which is plural, videosocials.net/show hosts. Both of you, of course, in the follow-up, you'll get that. It'll be in the show notes. Videosocials.net/show hosts. There is a nominal fee for those folks that don't yet host a podcast or a live stream, etc. And maybe that's the impetus to start one and get into the event for free. So yeah, I'd love for you guys to benefit from our community really in June. And then July, I want to say July 28th, which is the last Thursday in July. Before we learn more about your shows and how we can watch it and listen to it and benefit directly from it, are you a podcast junkie like I am? Do you listen to a lot of shows, Mary? Or watch a lot of shows?
I watch a few.
Are you a fan of anyone else's podcast? Someone that you know well?
I'm a fan of Colleen Biggs has a podcast where it's like Leap for Ladies. So it's Take the Leap, and she interviews female entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's a really cool thing that she's been doing for a while, and she's very good about helping publicize other women in business.
That's awesome. That could be a nice tie-in for Dr. Sree's show as well.
Yeah,
because
that's
a neat, that's really cool. How do you know Colleen? Did you know her personally, or you met her because
I
of the
know
show?
her personally at this point because I met her in virtual networking.
Right.
I went to a summit that was posted out of Australia, which led me to someone who was doing speaker engagements in Georgia, which led me to somebody who was doing speaker things in California. And somewhere along the line, I met Colleen. Ended up going to a retreat she had, a 4-day weekend in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it was awesome. Fabulous.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So so you've really been part of her world.
I have been part of her world.
Yes. A raving fan. That's great. Dr. Sree, what about you? Do you listen to and watch a lot of podcasts, and are you a raving fan?
I do listen to a lot of podcasts. They're not always related to coaching and business and stuff, but I some of my
I'm gonna put you on the spot. What are those varied interests, if you don't mind mentioning? Because I don't always listen to a lot of business podcasts. I'm a wordsmith. I like writing. I like words. So I like one show that happens to be A Way with Words. I'm a fan of. I don't know them personally, but so I listen to a lot of shows that are not necessarily business or marketing related, even though that's my world. What about you?
I mean, this is I listen to a lot of the On Being podcasts. I love those a lot. One of my dreams is to become an interviewer like Krista Tippett. But it's just a lot of the shows that focus on the combination of philosophy and language and spirituality and all of those kinds of things is what attracts me. Yeah.
And are you a raving fan of someone that you know well that hosts a podcast?
I am a raving fan of Lori Lyons, who's also helping me with my business, and she's got a business called Ignite Your Marketing.
Sure, I know that.
And she would be also a great guest, and I think she would fit in really well with Mary's.
I think so too. Yeah, you should definitely introduce. I mean, I know Lori. I've been on her show, and she should be on this show. I don't think she has been. At least not this version. I don't think she's been on my podcast, but hopefully she will be through your endorsement. And as you can see, there's a nice little whirlwind of introductions that can happen. It's like the whole point of it. Mary, I'll give you a chance in a moment. But Sree, how can people reach you? How can people watch your live stream on Instagram? How can people listen to your show? What's the easiest way?
So my podcasts are on all the podcast platforms, Apple and everything else. The Instagram live, my Instagram handle is Freedom with Sree. My business is called Freeing Ourselves, and so it's at Freedom with Sree, and I have a live every Tuesday at noon. And
what time is that? Tuesdays at noon. What time?
I'm in the Eastern time zone.
Okay.
I'm in the Eastern time. I'm in Atlanta.
Okay, great. Okay, good.
So so that's a really good way to get to know me.
Right.
My website is freeingourselves.com.
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 Excellent.
And the logo, which my brother designed, is a bird flying away, leaving all the questions behind.
Sure.
I say leaving all the questions of value and worth behind and freeing ourselves.
Good for you. That's wonderful. What about you, Mary? How can people get a hold of you and watch the live stream and listen to it, etc.?
You can join the Facebook group, Startup Business Launchpad. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be one word, right? So if someone types in Startup Business Launchpad,
it'll come up. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And it's a Facebook group. It's a public group. And on
Can you
YouTube,
stream into it?
Yeah, I stream into it. And then there's my YouTube channel is Business Riff or Stuck Time to Improv.
Yeah,
but
cool.
people can find me on my website at businessriff.com.
And that's RIFF.
Correct.
as in riffing, as in
As
improv.
in riffing, as in improv, yeah.
Yeah, businessriff.com is a great way.
Businessriff.com. That's makes me a fun podcast guest because people can throw me challenges that I haven't heard before and I riff on them.
You'll
And
riff
it
on
tends to be pretty entertaining because my brain doesn't work like other people.
them. For better or for worse, that's even better. That's great. Well, this has been exciting. This is riffing with the two of you and kind of seeing the commonalities and the threads and your insights of how you've grown your shows and the impact it's made on others and yourselves. That's kind of why we do it. Anything that I didn't cover that you want to quickly share as we wrap up? Mary?
Possibly if people need to do more virtual networking.
Yeah.
I'm Mary Scott. I have the information. You go to maryscott.info. And it's lots of links.
You'll have a kind of a calendar of.
It's a calendar of virtual networking events, yes. And I don't capture emails from that site, so you're not going to get spammed.
Right, for better or for worse. And Sri, what about you? Is there any closing thoughts that you would want to share?
No, I'd be happy to have a conversation with your audience if they would like to know more about. I do have a book called More Than Peace, Power and Presence.
Okay, no, let's say that a little bit slower. So say it again. What's the title of the book?
More Than Peace. I don't know how the
it's there. More Than Peace, Power and Presence.
With meditation.
That's neat. All right, kind of.
And so what it does is it goes through it. The whole purpose is to learn to accept all of yourself, the angry part of you, the jealous part of you, the shamed part of you. There are guided meditations that allow you to integrate yourself fully and be fully comfortable
and
in who you are in the moment.
And we can learn more about the book at freeingourselves.com.
Yes.
Okay. That's great. Yes. This has been tremendous. Dr. Sri, thank you so much for taking the time. Mary, it was great to see you, at least virtually again. And thank you to all of you. This is another episode of Why We Podcast. My name is Vik Rajan. I'm the co-founder of Video Socials. We are a video blogging community of attorneys and accountants, coaches, and consultants. More than 100 of us come together on a week-to-week basis to get our video blogs recorded together, fun and done. And many of our members are also VIP clients. That is to say, they have their own video interview podcasts that are run through Video Socials VIP. You can get to know us a little bit more through videosocials.net or videosocials.vip. So thank you again. And we stream just about every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. So it's relatively easy to find us on podcast platforms as well as all the social media platforms. Thank you again, guys.
Okay.